Good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Wealthwise with Edelweiss, our webinar series with financial experts across the industry. Our guest for today is Mr. Kaizad Adajania, the editor of Personal Finance at Money Control. Mr. Adajania is a veteran journalist with over 17 years of experience in tracking, analyzing, and writing about the Indian mutual funds industry. He is very well versed with areas of financial planning and money management. The topic for today is it the right time to invest in mutual funds? Please note that there might be a time lag of 10 to 15 seconds due to network or connectivity issues. Kindly bear with us. Over to you, Mr. Gaizal.
Hi, Anaga. Good evening, and thank you so much for having me over. It's great to be here. And the presentation today, I'm going to just spend about 15-20 minutes talking about about investing in mutual funds, and of course, then we'll take as many questions as we can from the people who have been attending in this webinar. So some of the points that we are going to be covering are some of the most frequently asked questions as far as mutual fund investments are concerned in these, especially in these volatile, in these COVID times. The first topic I'm going to talk about is a very basic topic about whether the fact that you should continue with your SIPs or whether you should discontinue your SIPs. The other question plaguing people's mind is about debt funds, especially after what has happened with Franklin Templeton mutual funds and the debt fund credit crisis that we've been seeing in the past year and a half. Suddenly, people have turned very skeptical and they're very scared about debt funds. So we'll spend some time talking about that as well. I want to also spend some time talking about active and passive funds because that's the debate that's slowly getting traction. It's been getting traction for the past 2.5 years or so. And as we go ahead, this question will be asked again and again. And we'll round up the discussion with some basic principles about how you should manage your money in these COVID times. So let's start by talking about SIPs. Now, what happens is that this year especially has been very tough on people, very tough on investments. Market volatility has also taken down equity valuations. Mutual fund NAVs have gone down in March. We had the big crash. And what happens is that when equity markets turn very volatile, people turn skeptical. See, nobody questions equities. Nobody questions equity mutual funds when markets are going up. That's, at least in my experience, that's what I've noticed. Normally, when markets go down and markets fall so sharply, everybody starts questioning the validity of equities. Everybody starts questioning whether you should be investing in mutual funds at all or not. Suddenly, everything that gets connected to equity becomes a villain. So the point is, people have been asking, should you continue your SIPs? Do SIPs make sense? Do SIPs work or not? So we recently did this study with CRISIL. We just released this study at Money Control a few days ago, and I thought this is also a good occasion for us to revisit that study and talk a little bit more about it. So what we did was we wanted to see whether SIPs actually work or not. It's as simple as that. And number two, if it works, then for how long you should continue your SIPs to get a good chance of making some good returns from your SIPs. So what we did was we did a rigorous stress test for SIPs. We shortlisted about 45 schemes that have been in existence 15 years ago in January 2005. We wanted to capture multiple bull runs. So we thought of starting from January 2005. That gives us about 15 years worth of data. Okay, so that's a lot of data. So we started simulating SIPs. CRISIL ran all the numbers. We jointly decided upon what the methodology would be. So what we did was at the start of every month since January 2005, we started 1 year SIP, 1.5 year SIP, 2 year SIP, 2.5 year SIP, three and a half, and so on and so forth, all the way till 10-year SIPs. So we simulated all these SIPs starting from every month from January 2005.
Hi, Keza. Could you just make the PPT full screen? I feel some of our attendees are having
Sorry. I thought it was full screen. Is it full screen now?
Yes. I think it's.
I'm so sorry. I thought it was full screen.
No problem. Kindly continue.
Okay. So as I said, we wanted to put SIPs through a rigorous testing to see whether they actually work or not. What is the ideal tenure for SIPs? You see, so many people invest in mutual funds and equity mutual funds, but the average age of equity mutual fund scheme, at least investment, is about 2.5 or maybe 3 years. Okay, so does it really make sense to commit to an SIP for 3 years, 4 years, or preferably even longer? That is what we wanted to see. So if you see if you see this particular slide, the average return, the average return is quite high in the initial years. Okay, it sort of settles down to about 12%, 13% after, let's say, 4.5 years or so. Otherwise, if you see, the average SIP return is about 17%, 15% in the initial years. Okay, now the question is, if the average return is so good in the initial years itself, must you do an SIP only for, let's say, a shorter tenure? The answer is no. Okay, because high returns come with high risk. This is another finding that we had from the same study. So what we did was, we not only calculated the average returns, we calculated the maximum return and the minimum return from any scheme across these different tenures. And look at the maximum and minimum return in the initial years. The maximum is quite high, but even the minimum also is quite low. The worst 1 year SIP of any of these one of these 43 schemes between 2005 2020 was minus 88.2%. Okay, so that is what you stand to lose. That is the nature of volatility if you choose an SIP for a very short tenure, very short period of time. The maximum, as you see, if we follow my cursor, the maximum and minimum return will converge as the years go by. This means that the volatility of your SIP goes down as you increase your tenure. So this is something very important for every one of us to note, that, in the chase of high returns, you shouldn't be churning your portfolios too soon. You should give it some time to perform. And earlier, about 4.5 to 5 years also was deemed to be good to start an SIP. But because the markets have been so volatile, a safe tenure of an SIP would be anything beyond 6 to 7 years. This is a direct question that we thought we actually wanted to ask when we started out this study, is, do SIPs work? Because what happens is that when equity markets get volatile, people start doubting equities, people start doubting equity mutual funds. Now, I myself have been investing in mutual funds for the past 20 years now. Okay, so I've seen up markets, I've seen down markets. But one thing, and one very simple lesson which I've learned, is that, if you are patient with your investment, okay, if you don't speculate, if you are patient with your investment, if you stay for a long period of time, the chances of losing money goes down. There is no guarantee that you will make money, but the chances of making, the probability of losses actually go down. If you see this, this chart basically tells you percentage of times the SIP returns were greater than 10%. Now, in the previous chart, if you see, let me just show you this, the maximum return and the minimum return. Do you see where my cursor is right now? It's over 9.5 years. And what is it that you see over here? You don't see any minimum return. You don't see any negative return. So this was a very interesting finding of our study, which shows that, if you invest in SIPs for at least a period of 9.5 years, or preferably even more, then there is zero chance of losing money. Of course, I have to tell you, there's a big caveat over here. This is a back study which we did, limited number of funds, only about 43 equity funds, because we wanted to have a good representation of large cap, mid cap schemes and so on. And this is a study that we did since January 2005. So obviously there were fund houses like Edelweiss, like Mirae, like Quantum Mutual Fund, Motilal Oswal. These fund houses were not there at that time. And some of these fund houses have done very well ever since their inception. So of course we couldn't take all those funds, but this is just to show that, and we did this study 2 years ago also to see if the numbers were the same or not. So, approximately 9 to 9.5 to around 10 years, if you continue your SIPs, there is zero chance of making, or almost zero chance of making, any negative return, which means that you will not lose money. However, having said that, a return of, let's say, 1% or a 2% return, okay, that is also, it means that there is no negative return, means you're getting some money. But do you really want your SIPs to return so low? Do you want to what is the return? What is the expected return that is acceptable to you when you invest in an equity mutual fund? So we thought, let's see what is the tenure of SIP, and what kind of SIPs give you at least 10% returns. So if you see over here, as the tenure goes up, the number of funds that have given you at least 10% returns go up from 75% in 7.5 years, 76%, 8 years. Over here in 9 years, 85% or 83% of your SIPs will give you 10%, at least 10% returns. So there is good news as well as slightly bad news. The good news is that obviously, if you see, it's exactly the opposite of this chart. Okay, your maximum returns go down as your tenure goes up, your average settles down, and there are more number of SIPs that give you more than 10%. The slightly cautionary news over here is that if 83% of your funds are giving you a chance of earning you at least 10% returns if you do your SIPs for 9-year period, that means there are a few other funds also that will give you returns of less than 10%. Which brings me to my final point in this particular module of SIPs, is that choosing the right fund is important. Okay, you can't just select a fund with your eyes shut and expect that it will gain returns for you. No, it doesn't work that way. The concept of SIP works, okay, but one mutual fund is always different from another mutual fund. So you have to constantly engage with your advisor, constantly engage with your financial planner. And I think a reasonable time frame to sort of examine your funds would be, or rather have periodical reviews with your advisor about, let's say, once in 6 months or so is also more than enough. But if you really want to see whether your fund has been consistently doing well, have a review or rather take a call about your fund every 3 years. Because if you get into a wrong fund, then even if you stay invested, look at this, even if you continue your SIP for about 10 years or so, you will still find that this is not 100%. See, this is not 100%. That means there is some percentage of funds which would give you less than 10%. And that causes a little bit of a heartburn, because if you've been doing SIPs for 10 years, you want meaningful returns, right? I mean, you don't want returns that, you don't want funds that hardly give you any returns. The other thing, what we realized was that mid-cap funds did particularly well over a very long period of time, like over 9-10 years or so. 98% of mid-cap funds give returns in excess of 10%. Now, this is the average. What you're seeing over here, all these charts, what we have done over here, they are all average. Okay, so average of, we consider large cap schemes, multi-cap, mid-cap, and tax saving schemes. But if you really break down which categories have, slightly outperformed the other, mid-cap funds, yes, they are more volatile than your large cap funds. But, in this case, at least if you hold your mid-cap fund for a reasonably long period of time, then the chances of making money are slightly higher than, I would say, other categories of funds, like let's say large cap or so. So this particular module was designed to sort of answer two basic questions. One is that, do SIPs work? And if they work, then what is the period for which you should continue your SIPs for? The other module that, and rather the other question that's plaguing many investors' minds these days is about debt funds. Because, what happened with Franklin Templeton, then they decided to wind up 6 of the debt funds last week of April, was quite unprecedented. It was shocking. It has never happened before. Okay, you can close 1 fund, 2 funds, but 6 funds you're closing with an average total combined assets under management of about 25,000 crores. It was quite unprecedented. And suddenly, people were wondering whether debt funds are good, whether you should, in fact, whether they are worth putting your money in at all, or should you just put all your money in just savings banks accounts and fixed deposits and be done with. So, not all debt funds are bad. Okay, and not all debt funds are risky. Debt funds definitely play a role in your portfolios. You have to have a mix of both equity as well as debt funds in your portfolio. Now, how much equity and how much debt you have, that you need to ask yourself how much risk you're comfortable in taking. If you're not comfortable in taking too much of risk, then the debt portion would be a little high and your equity portion would be a little low. But if you're comfortable in taking a little bit more risk, then equity funds would be a little high in your scheme of things. But that doesn't mean that debt funds should not be there. Debt funds also should be there. So, debt funds come in various shapes and sizes. Okay, understand why you're investing in a debt fund. There are two secrets about making money from debt funds that I have learned in my career. And I've spoken to numerous experts on mutual funds, debt funds as part of my daily job. So there are two things that, two secret that I'll share with you how to make money in debt funds. One is that you need to map your investment horizon with your debt fund in which you want to put your money in. Okay, so in equity funds, it's relatively easier because you're saying that equities are for the long run. So if you want to invest, let's say for the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, I will not invest in equity funds. Okay, because equity funds are meant for the long run. So if you want to put your money, if you want to invest your money for anything less than 5 years, please don't look at equity funds. It's as simple as that. But in a debt fund can basically, you can put your money in a debt fund if you need your money. Let's say if you need to redeem your money in the next 1 month, could be in the next 6 months, could be in the next 1 year, could be even in the next 3 or 5 years also. So debt funds are that way. One debt fund is that way much more different from the other debt fund. Okay, so if you want to put your money for 6 months, then there is a debt fund for you. If you want to put your money for 1 year, then you can either consider, let's say, a short-term debt fund or a low-duration debt fund. If you want to consider, let's say, putting your money for just 1 week, maybe overnight fund or maybe liquid fund, depends on what your advisor advises you. So but you cannot put your money in, let's say, a credit risk fund or a short-term debt fund if you want your money just next week, or if you want your money within just a month or two. All right. Similarly, if you want to put your money for, let's say, 2 years, okay, and you say that I want almost zero risk, okay, so I will put my money in an overnight fund. That also doesn't work because overnight fund, yes, it's the least risky of all the debt funds, but after 2 years, when you go to withdraw your money, the returns that an overnight fund will give you will not satisfy you. So you would feel that if I would have put my money in a fixed deposit, maybe I would have got something more. Okay, so you have to sort of map your investment horizon with the kind of every debt fund pertains to a different investment horizon. It's very important for you to map the two. That's one secret. The other secret of making money from debt funds is basically your return expectation. Okay, a financial planner that I had spoken to, and I'm in touch with him. What I learned from him was that look at inflation plus 2% point returns. That's all. Don't expect anything more than that from a debt fund. If you want to put anything, if you want to expect anything more than that, then you better be prepared for the risk and you better prepare for the consequences that can come with it. Okay, the consequences could be credit risks, which we have seen play out in the last 1.5 years. But a return expectation of 2% plus inflation rate is an ideal return to expect from your debt fund. Okay, debt funds versus equity funds, who's the more complicated creature? It's a very tough choice to make now, as opposed to, let's say, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when we could just close our eyes and say that equity funds are far more complicated funds to pick and choose from, and debt funds are very easy. But we know that in the last 3 years, what kind of risks have played up in debt funds. That does not mean that debt funds are bad. It just means that choosing a debt fund requires definitely more homework. I wouldn't say more caution, but more homework and a little bit more interaction with your advisor as to why you're picking the debt fund, what are you picking it for, what do you want, what are your expectations, how much risk you can take from that debt fund. So this is what I wanted to talk about debt funds. The Templeton crisis will obviously take a bit of time to sort of settle down, but that does not mean that debt funds are bad. Debt funds are good. There are pockets of debt funds which are meant for risky investors. If you are not risky investors, and most of you all ideally would not be, because risk is what you would want to take in an equity fund. In a debt fund, you would return off capital is more important than return on capital. So, for those of you all who don't want to take too much of risks, there are categories like corporate bond funds or banking and PSU funds, that are suitable for people who don't want to take any risks. So it does not mean that you should shut your door on debt funds. Active funds versus passive funds is a debate that has come up in the last couple of years or so, primarily because of two reasons. One is that SEBI a couple of years back came and said that all mutual funds have to compare their performances with, of course, that all mutual fund schemes have to compare their performance with the benchmark index, right? But there is something called the total returns index. Okay, so the returns of total return index are a little higher. So, the alpha between the performance of an active fund versus a TRI benchmark has now gone down. Okay, so the outperformance has definitely gone down of large cap funds, especially more than any other equity funds. And second reason is that, a couple of years ago, again, SEBI, in the name of standardization, they said that, okay, the top 100 stocks would be the large cap stocks, because what used to happen earlier was that different funds used to have different definitions of large cap, different definitions of mid cap, different definitions of small cap. So when you as an investor go to pick up those funds, and you say that, okay, I want a large cap fund, somebody would say that, okay, our large cap universe constitutes of the top 200 stocks, while somebody else would say that our large cap stocks constitute only the top 100 stocks. Okay, so obviously the one who is going for 200 stocks would have slightly higher chances of outperforming than the one who strictly sticks within the top 100 universe. Okay, so then SEBI said enough is enough. There has to be standardization. If you say your large cap has to be same as my large cap, my mid cap has to be same as your mid cap. So the definition of a large cap fund has become very narrow. Now it is only 100 stocks. Okay, what has also happened was that in the last year and a half, or even 2.5 years also, if you see, there have been only 6-7 stocks in the benchmark index, Sensex and Nifty, which have really performed well, and that has taken away that has taken the entire index up. Okay, now for a mutual fund, it's not possible to stay invested only in these 7-8 stocks. Okay, they would have to be diversified. They would have to invest in, let's say, 50 or 60 stocks. So what happens? They underperform. Okay, they underperform the large cap index, and this has been happening in large cap funds more than in any other category. Because if the index goes up only because of 7 to 8 stocks, the fund house cannot afford to invest all its money in just those 7-8 stocks. The fund house would need to diversify. So these are the reasons why large cap funds have found it difficult to outperform the benchmark index. And this is where passive funds have started to make inroads slowly and slowly. Okay, in mid caps and in small cap funds, there is still a lot of scope for outperformance. So there I don't see passive funds making a real dent, but there are fund houses now that are launching passive funds even in mid caps or even in small caps also, and some of them have been doing pretty well. So passive funds are here to stay. Passive funds are not going anywhere. In fact, passive funds will grow only more and more from here. But in a market like India, I still see active funds playing a major role. Maybe in large cap funds, more and more advisors, some advisors have already started shifting their clients' money to passive funds only for large cap portfolios. We might see more and more advisors warming up to active funds as far as large cap funds are concerned. Personally, if you ask me, I don't give fund recommendations, but which is why I'm talking about a passive fund over here. A Nifty, in many circumstances, one Nifty fund and one Nifty Next 50 fund are good enough for your overall large cap funds. For the rest, you can invest in passive funds, but I'm in no way suggesting that you get rid of all your active funds, even in the large cap space. But I'm just saying that you watch out for passive funds. My last slide today is on investing in COVID times. So this is I'm now taking the discussion a little beyond mutual funds. Um, you know, many lessons to be learned from how one has to manage money in these COVID times. We always recommend everyone to have an emergency corpus, contingency corpus, okay? Because what has happened is that suppose if you lose your job, and many industries, many sectors these days in these COVID times have seeing people losing jobs, salaries have been cut, business income has been cut. So, you have to have your emergency corpus. Okay, emergency corpus is basically that corpus which consists of your compulsory monthly expenses, which you just cannot ignore. Whether you have an income or you don't have an income, you must pay those expenses. Now, what are those expenses? Let's say your EMIs that you have to pay, because if you have already taken a loan, you cannot not pay a loan just because you have lost a job. Of course, keeping the moratorium aside, but I don't want to talk about the moratorium here, because moratorium is not a holiday, it's a deferment. Your interest is still getting compounded. So EMIs you have to pay. You have to pay your children's school fees, okay, your grocery expenses, your fruits, vegetables, your eating expenses, some amount of medical expenses which you just can't ignore. So all this becomes a part of your emergency corpus. Calculate what your emergency corpus is, multiplied by either 3, which means for 3 months, or maybe 6 months, or maybe even 9 months also. It all depends upon your situation. If you're a single person, then maybe a 3-month emergency corpus is good enough. Let's say if you have a spouse and it's a double income household, even then also about 3 to 4 months of emergency corpus is okay. But many planners say that if you have dependents, or if you have parents, senior citizens who are dependent on you, and if you have a large household to run, then obviously an emergency corpus of about 9 to 10 months is essential. We had specified the need for emergency corpus a lot last year when Jet Airways collapsed, and we had seen so many employees of Jet Airways coming down on streets and protesting that they have high EMIs to pay. They've taken loans, and a lot of stories about emergency corpus had come in publications such as Money Control and other publications also. And we wish that more and more people understand the concept of an emergency corpus and build an emergency corpus if you don't have one already. If you don't have an emergency corpus now, then I suggest that you take a look at your portfolio and see what you can liquidate. For example, if you have low return insurance policies, if you have a lot of gold in your portfolio which you don't need, you might sell that and create an emergency corpus. And from there, you can sustain yourself on a month-to-month basis till you find an alternative good job. Health insurance is extremely crucial. Okay, I cannot tell you how important, I cannot stress upon this fact as to how important health insurance is. In fact, I will tell you this, that before you start thinking about making money through your investments, through mutual funds or stocks or whatever, please first make an emergency corpus and have some health insurance with you. Only then you start thinking about how you want to make money from mutual funds. Health insurance is very, very necessary. Have a basic health insurance plan for you as well as your family. Now, health insurance is what? In simple terms, let's say if you get hospitalized and if you incur a cost of a bill of about 5 lakh, your insurance company will give you back your 5 lakh. You have to submit your bills and they will pay you. Okay. So this is, in very simple layman terms, is what health insurance is. It reimburses your hospitalization costs. Now, hospitalization costs can really, really go up. Medical expenses, healthcare expenses have really risen. So you need to sort of be prepared for this. Two things over here. There are many companies which also give health insurance to their employees. Okay. Many people come and tell me that, look, I have a company health insurance. I don't need my own personal health insurance. That is wrong. Okay. This is a huge myth. Please understand that if your company has given you a health insurance, it is only for the time that your job is there. The moment you retire from that job, or the moment you leave that job and go elsewhere, that health insurance will just vanish overnight. And what happens if you get hospitalized after that? You have to pay the hospital bills. Your past employees are not going to come and pay your hospital bills. Okay, so even if you have your company-based health insurance, it is very important to have your own private health insurance. Please do not ignore this. Okay, you may suppose if there is hospitalization, God forbid, then you may fall back on your company health insurance and not want to extinguish your own personal health insurance. That's fine, but you must have your health insurance at all times, your private health insurance. The other reason why I'm saying you should have your own health insurance is basically what happens is that suppose if you leave a job at, let's say, age 45 or age 50, and you switch jobs and you go to some other company, and what if that company doesn't give you their own health insurance? In that case, what will happen is that you have to buy your own health insurance, your own private health insurance at that age. Now, if you go and buy health insurance at age 45 or age 50, it's going to be very expensive for you. And who knows, by that time, you might have some lifestyle diseases which may or may not be covered through the health insurance. So, it's very important for you to get your own health insurance at an early age so that any eventualities happen later, you're taking care of it. The other lesson that, or rather the other takeaway that many of us have had in this COVID health crisis is that what happens, we've spoken about SIPs exhaustively. If I always recommend people to have continue SIPs over a long period of time, but it's okay to stop your SIPs when there is a cash crunch. You can take a pause in your SIP. That's okay. It becomes a discretionary expense, but your emergency corpus and health insurance is very, very important. Some people say that, I have a lot of investments, so if I have any hospitalization expenses, like my investments can take care of it. Actually, that's wrong, because if your investments come down to zero because of hospitalization, then your investments will start from zero. But your health insurance, once you utilize your health insurance policy this year, it gets reinstated. The entire amount gets reinstated again next year. Okay, so you again start from the top. Avoid taking any big ticket loans. Be very careful about that. Don't defer all your big ticket purchases in these times, because we don't know how long the virus is going to be here. So I always tell people, take loans only if it is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, please don't take loans in these times. And last but not the least, if you can, of course, moratoriums is there. So moratorium, RBI has given moratoriums, 6-month moratoriums to borrowers. But as we've shown numerous calculations, your interest will get compounded. It is not a loan holiday. It is not an EMI holiday. It is a deferment. Okay, your interest gets compounded. So if you can pay your EMIs even during this COVID times, please continue paying your EMIs. So that's all from my side, and I'm happy to take any questions that you all would have.
Thank you so much, Kaizad. So we have received a lot of questions, and I would like to start the first question with, one of the articles where somebody has asked that in one of your recent articles, you had shared some secrets on how to maximize SIP returns. Could you share some light on that through, our presentation, that if you're investing in SIPs, how can we maximize the returns?
So this is what we had spoken about. Okay, look at this. Look at the slide. Okay, now the maximum return. Okay, let me show you this one. Let me show you straight away the slide. Okay, the average return. Look at the steadiness of average return. Correct. If you stay invested for about at least 4.5 to 5 years. Okay, it gets even steadier if you stay invested in SIP for 7 years. Correct. Okay. Correct. Now you juxtapose that with this. Look at the minimum returns and look at the maximum returns in the initial years. If you just do SIPs for a very short period of time, this is what you can gain, but this is what you can lose also. So you don't want to be in a situation where you stand a large probability of losing money. Okay. Instead, if you stay invested for a long period of time, and I know it's become a cliche thing, long period of time, what is long term and all that. So we've actually done a study to show you what is long term. So this is what is long term. Okay, anything greater than 7.5 to 8 years is long term. So this is the way you make money in an SIP. That's one thing. Tenure. Play be on the right side of the time period for which you are doing your SIP, and also periodically. I'm not like every day, but like once in 6 months or once in a year, have a look at your mutual fund, how it is doing. Is it consistent returns? Don't go for a mutual fund that is at the top. Okay, go for a mutual fund. I would be very comfortable if a mutual fund gives me very steady, very average returns consistently, because that is consistency. Consistency is more important, because when you invest in a mutual fund, it can go right at the top, but that same mutual fund can come right at the bottom also next year. So keep these two things in mind. That's good enough to make money from your SIPs. Again, there is no guarantee for equities. Okay, nobody will guarantee you any money for equities. The chances of making losses, is that high or is that low? That is what you can influence to a large extent.
Okay. Because we have had some questions where a person is asking that, at times, how do you work towards finding a mutual fund or, investing in a SIP which gives you best returns? Now, these returns may not be same for over 5 to 7 years. And the person has cited an example of Reliance ELSS. But, as an individual investor, how do you assess funds from a long-term horizon?
So, see, this is where you have to understand what the fund philosophy is. Okay, first of all, you have to try and understand what the fund does. Okay, some amount of homework, some amount of research is necessary. You can't just say that, this is a, let's say this is a large fund house or this is a trusted fund house, so all the funds would be good. ऐसा नहीं होता है, it doesn't work that way. You can't just go by the name of the fund house. You have to do some amount of research, understand what that fund is all about. Is that fund really, look at the portfolios. Okay, at the very basic, I'm saying at the very, very basic, I'm saying even before you go and meet your advisor, even before you talk to your advisor, open up the portfolio, see some kind of what is a trend of past returns. Past returns is not a guarantee for future performance, but it does give you some indication. Look at the portfolios, the top 10 scripts or the top 20 scripts. Do you see many unknown names? Do you see many known names? What is the concentration of the funds? Has that fund manager invested, let's say 12%, 13% in the particular top script? Is it very concentrated? All those things, some of these things you have to see. When you go to your advisor, ask him, what is it that is special about this one? Why should I choose this one? Why not that fund? Ask a lot of questions to your advisor and judge your advisor by the quality of answers, conviction that is there in that person's answers. Okay, you will get an idea of basically how much research your advisor has also put in your fund, and his research rather.
Okay. So, considering.
And I always, Ananga, I always take into consideration funds which have been around for at least I would say, at this point in time, I would say pick a fund that has been around for at least 5 years. Okay, there was a time when I used to say 3 years, but now we have so many funds, so many mutual fund schemes in the market that you really don't need to invest in any new scheme. Okay, so the longer the tenure, the better. Okay, so if the fund has been around for 5 years, or if the fund has been around for even 7 years also, you would see how that fund has performed. There is a benchmark index. Every fund house in your fact sheet, open the fact sheet, see the performance, but see the benchmark index performance also. So at a very simplistic level, you can just see whether your fund is outperformed, given something more than your benchmark returns. If the fund is given more than your benchmark returns, the fund has done its job. Okay, then don't compare and see whether this fund has done well against all funds, because you will always find that there are 3 dozen, 4 dozen, 5 dozen funds. Some funds will always outperform the other. So don't get into that rat race. What you can see and what your fund manager is supposed to do is it's supposed to outperform against its chosen benchmark index. See how many times that fund has outperformed its benchmark index across the different tenures that it has given, in addition to the other things that I just told you. And don't, as far as possible, please don't invest in new fund offers. Okay, don't invest in new fund offers unless the theme is extremely promising. The theme is something that is not there in an open-ended fund, which brings me to my second point. As far as possible, don't invest in closed-end funds. Okay, as far as possible. Again, because what happens is in a closed-end fund, your money is stuck for the next 5 years, 6 years. Then even if the fund underperforms, then you don't have a choice. You can't exit that fund. In an open-ended fund, you can at least exit. Okay. And if the same theme is available in an open-ended fund, which comes with a track record, why not invest over there? Right?
Okay.
Why do you have to invest in a new fund offer? So all those things you have to keep in mind and keep your portfolio as simple as possible. If you don't understand, something is too complex for you to understand. If your advisor tells you that, okay, इसमें तो इतना return मिलेगा, उसमें तो इतना return मिलेगा, if something, always remember this very basic rule, whichever investment you take, whichever investment, I follow only this one basic rule. And I always tell people, if something is too good to be true, then it is in fact too good to be true.
Okay. So, you briefly touched upon 2-3 topics around which we also have questions. Now, some people often while investing in a mutual fund, people have this confusion of, comparing a mutual fund investment return vis-a-vis the market cycle and how the returns are performing in comparison. So, do you think that during volatility, it is a good time to possibly increase or decrease your investment in a mutual fund as against the market cycle, or those two are totally separate things?
No, that is what you invest in. That is why you invest in a mutual fund through an SIP.
Okay.
That is why, because SIP takes away the moderation of volatility. When markets are down, you automatically buy more units of a mutual fund, and when markets are up, you buy lesser number of units.
But
so SIP takes care of your volatility.
But you shouldn't look at them on a comparative basis in terms of returns, that sometimes, often when the markets are performing great, you end up thinking that I might get, say, a 10% or a 15% return by investing in an XYZ equity, whereas, my funds will obviously give me returns over a longer term horizon. So how do we sort of, deal with that confusion we have as an investor while choosing?
Okay. So my philosophy is that if you understand a particular company, why the company is doing what the company is doing, it is on stock markets. If you understand the business, if you have the ability to read balance sheets, read annual reports, and judge by yourself as to why what are these companies' prospects. Leave aside the gains that it may have made in the recent, let's say if there has been a recent rise in markets, and leave aside the gain that the company would have made. Okay, if you understand that company well, you would understand why that share is going up or the share is going down. But I'm afraid there are many investors who don't bother to study annual reports, don't bother to study balance sheets. They just go by tips. It's sometimes they put it very meekly, like I got this tip from somebody, so I'm investing, this company is doing very well, I should invest in this. Or to a more sophisticated thing, like it's a very good brand, it's a very good company, I'm sure it would do very well, the products are doing very well in the market. But that's not enough. You have to understand what the company is for you to be able to buy the shares of that company. Otherwise you stick to a mutual fund and you let the experts decide which stocks to buy and which stocks to sell.
Okay.
That's what I would say. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So we have another question here. The gentleman is asking that he has around 25 years to retire. Okay. And he has been investing in small and mid cap funds. Do you think that it is a good time for him right now to switch to large cap funds on an overall perspective? So while we're planning our retirement, at what is the right time to start investing in large cap funds, or should we do that just from the start?
You should do that just from the start, but you should also have a mix of large and mid cap funds. And I would put mid cap and small cap funds in the same bracket.
Okay.
Have about on a rough scale, I would say if 100 rupees you are putting in equity, then about 60 rupees is good to be kept in large cap funds. The rest you can split between mid cap and small cap funds.
Okay. So a lot of, since the banking and the financial services sector has been in in the news, obviously. So a lot of people are asking, how do you look at sectoral funds now? Should you start a SIP in them, or should you just completely ignore them? Is it a good time?
Two things. Again, if you understand the sector well, I always say that if you are a banker yourself and if you're working in a bank, or if you're very closely associated to the banking sector, you would understand how the banking sector moves up and down. You would understand the machinations that play within the banking sector. In that case, you can invest in a banking fund. Okay, but otherwise, for a large percentage of the population, I would never recommend a sector fund or a theme fund because it comes with a lot of risks. Okay, they are never your first funds in your portfolio. They are never your second or third funds also in your portfolio. They are some of the last funds that you invest, assuming that your portfolio is already an established or a well-rounded one, and you want to, let's say, allocate some 3, 4, or 5% in a sector fund. You can invest in a sector, provided you understand what that fund is all about. Otherwise, stay away from sector funds and do not invest in sector funds through an SIP. An SIP is only meant if you're going to be around in that fund for a long period of time. Sector funds and theme funds need you to time your entry and time your exit properly. All right. So SIP does not allow you to do that.
Okay. Thank you. So we have had some, vague questions, but, majorly people are asking about arbitrage funds. What should one keep in mind while investing in these funds? Is it for the short term or, the long term? So could you just throw some light on that?
Arbitrage funds, look, honestly, I haven't tracked arbitrage funds so closely. But arbitrage funds, they have gone through phases in the past. They are a good addition to your portfolio, provided your advisor suggests you that. Obviously, it gives you equity tax advantage and liquid fund returns, but arbitrage opportunities must be there in the market. Okay, so we've seen situations when arbitrage opportunities have not been there in the market, but by and large, they are decent funds. I have got nothing against them. By and large, they are decent funds.
Okay. So I just like.
But they are not as I wouldn't say that they are as simple as liquid funds, right? I mean, liquid funds and overnight funds, you have a certain vision of what's coming in your liquid fund and overnight fund. Okay. In arbitrage funds, I wouldn't say that there is that much of clarity as to what would happen to your fund once your chosen investment horizon gets done. So that amount of risk is there.
Correct. So I'd like to just inform our attendees that we are moving towards our last questions now. So, just keep them ready. So the next question is that, people are asking, how would you recommend a combination of a debt and an equity, fund in our, portfolio? Some say the approach is that keep a 70-30 exposure. What should be the ideal balance? Or should we just move towards a balanced fund?
No, a separate debt and equity fund is also very doable. And there is no such percentage of fixed percent like 70-30 or 60-40 or 50-50 or so on and so forth. You have to, it's a term is called asset allocation. It's a very, very simple term. Many people use it. It's an abused term, but it's very simple and very essential and very crucial. So before you invest in mutual funds, ask yourself how much risks you are willing to take. What is your age? What are you saving for? Okay. And, in an equity fund, obviously, as I said repeatedly, that you have to have at least a 5 to 7 year time horizon. So ask yourself if there are certain aspects of your financial goals that are as many years away, so that you can put your money in equity funds for them and then just sort of fill it, shut it, forget it kind of a thing. Well, not exactly forget it, but you get my point, right? I mean, if you have some goals coming up in the next 3 years, then I wouldn't recommend you put anything in equity funds, put everything in debt and fixed deposits. Okay, but if you have your financial goals, if you are saving for your retirement, or if you are saving for your kids' education, children's education, which is many years away or some years away, then you can put something in equity funds. Then you can put anything depending on your risk profile. I can't recommend, for a wide audience without looking at ascertaining the risk profiles. We can't recommend how much exactly equity and exactly debt, but I'm giving you broad principles which you should look at.
Okay. So, we have received a lot of questions on gold and how do you look at that as an investment. So I'm just going to ask a very open-ended question in terms of what do you think of gold as an investment in the current scenario? How would a retail investor sort of approach it, or how should they approach it, or something they should keep in mind given the current times?
Okay. gold is an essential part of your portfolio. You must have about 5 to 10% of your entire allocation, portfolio allocation into gold. Okay, you can buy sovereign gold bond funds. They are also good enough, but there is no liquidity. There is very little liquidity in them. Otherwise, you can buy gold mutual funds also. You can buy gold ETFs also. So about an allocation of about 5 to 10% is good enough. As far as gold as an investment in these times are concerned, gold has already seen a lot of traction already. Okay, so gold prices had started to go up from December 2018, and they have been going up consistently. So don't expect past returns to continue for a very long time. Returns would be subdued. I feel like nobody can say with certainty as to what the returns would be from gold. It all depends upon various geopolitical economic factors. So I wouldn't dare get into a prediction mode over here. But all I can say is that if you are investing in gold looking at what the past returns have been, then it might make a mistake. That if you have a well-rounded portfolio, then allocate about 5 to 10% in gold and just keep it, because it's a hedge against volatility, and it typically moves in opposite directions of equities. So 5 to 10% of your portfolio, if it's in gold, that's good enough for you.
Okay. Thank you so much. I guess with that, we come to the end of our webinar. So, Keza, do you have some closing remarks?
Closing remarks, I would just say that, keep investing. Okay, don't get swayed by the markets. I know these are very uncertain times, and it's a really sad situation if anybody has lost a job, or income cuts and salary cuts happen. But if you can afford to continue your SIPs, please continue your SIPs, because you will not regret this later when the markets turn around. When economy turns around, your portfolio would have already grown by then. And if you sit on the sidelines right now, and once economy comes back, once market comes back, and then you contemplate investing in, by the time you invest in, at that time the markets would have already run up. So please take advantage of the low valuations right now, low markets, and keep investing as much as you can. Have health insurance, have emergency corpus before you even think about starting to invest, and keep paying your EMIs. Loan moratorium is not a very healthy thing. Okay, if you must take loan moratorium, take it. But if you can avoid loan moratorium, please keep paying your EMIs. That's it.
So thank you so much. Keza, your insights were, I feel the audience has benefited a lot from your experience. I believe, the finer points that you brought in terms of how we should manage our overall investment in COVID times, they will genuinely help all our retail investors. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
To our audience, thank you for tuning in. We look forward to having you with us for our next webinar next week. Till then, stay home and stay safe. Happy weekend.